As Rumble Season 1 comes to an end and Season 2 begins, I believe it's time to take a trip back to the beginning of this season and recap its highs and lows, and ponder exactly what changes could or will be made in future seasons to maintain its quality. Let's start back on the launch date of June 20th, 2023. As the game was rolled out, news on how the seasons would play out were virtually non-existent. The Battle Pass was accessible, but when the season events would drop was anyone's guess. Until 10 days later on June the 30th, when we were blessed with a very straightforward map showing exactly when certain events, including content drops, would happen. This was great, though considering it was 10 days into the first season, it would have been nice to get this day one, or at least have known it was coming. After a double Hero XP weekend and a Badge Bonanza XP weekend came July 6th, the early access weekend for Ripperoo. Finally, the meat of the season was starting. We got to see how Toys for Bob was going to manage rolling out new content to players, and the execution was met with some confusion, to put it lightly. The intended method was to have these marbles pop up once per game, for a total of 5 marbles per day, with Ripperoo being the reward for 16 marbles. That meant for players to unlock him, they needed to play Rumble for a minimum of 4 days. This was seen pretty transparently as a cheeky way to harness player engagement throughout the whole weekend. Fortunately for players, however, though the marble limit was visible, actual enforcement for it was not. Marbles were once per game, all day, all weekend. This was great because players were able to pick their own pace for how they collected the rewards, though players could not ignore how the event was supposed to go. People expressed their worry and criticism online, leading to a response issued by Toys for Bob. He's an obnoxious, explosive chip damager that'll stop you from staying in one place for too long. He's a decent scorer thanks to his cannon, and has a fairly good time capturing gems, especially on Just Beachy. He can be tough to steer, especially when making quick thinking decisions. His stiffness can cause a wrong cannon shot, and you're not likely to win 1v1s with players who know what they're doing. But overall, he's a fun pick, if not a bit chaotic. We were also told of some vague patches and future potential patches. 1 week later on July 13th, we received our first game mode in Zaptrap. The gameplay is largely the same as regular Rumble, but trading the relic stations for an insta-kill method when you're close to a teammate. An electric fence with poor range can be used to scoop up tons of KOs. It's fun and a good time, but having it be a completely separate game mode worries me a bit because it essentially splits the player base in two. But we'll see how that type of setup works when more permanent game modes are introduced. Patches included a nerf to Tropy's health, a buff to Torna's health, a buff to the Flytrap Spitter's health, a nerf to the lifespan of Gazmoxian Guard. This update actually completely flipped the lid on the amount of guards and spitters used in games. Guards became way less frequent, in tandem with lasting not as long, and Flytrap spitters became abundant, and with their 3 times charge and 1/3 buff to their health, as well as their improved targeting and slowdown from the beta, Flytraps have quickly become one of the most reliable powers you can have equipped. As for heroes, this starts a trend of Tropy being, in my opinion, far too harshly nerfed, and Torna getting some well-needed support. July 20th brings forth the first new map, Bogged. The map is great, with the chaos dialed up to 11 by having both banks virtually next to each other. The bubbles are a nice, if not jumpy, relic station, with the epic relic station being a Wumpa payload. Activating and protecting it could be your Wumpa for the win, or a distraction long enough to play the game without your opponents paying too much attention to you. The event surrounding Bogged was, in my opinion, the best new content event for the season. Each game had a chance to spawn 1 to 2 blue fish depending on whether the map contained water, with Bogged spawning 3 blue fish in addition to some special fish used to get a bunch of cosmetic items, and most importantly, no limit. Ripperoo also had his full release on this day, and the game seemed to think people had unlocked him twice and played his unlock animation again. July 25th had another patch. Crash had his Wumpa count raised to 140, making him the highest Wumpa holder in the game, which is quite fitting. A buff to Brio's health, a nerf to Tropy's damage output, a nerf to Cortex's damage output, a nerf to Healing Fridge's health output, a buff to Garbage Dump's duration, a nerf to the Akano Relic Station damage output. Still, this won't be the last time Tropy gets a nerf. Finally, we see some love for Brio, who was definitely struggling to find his footing. August 3rd saw the release of the first new power. The overuse of this power on its weekend release certainly made things interesting. The power is honestly not very good, more risk than reward, and will more often than not leave you blown up. It is, however, incredibly fun to use. Succeed or fail at using it doesn't matter. I can't deny I was having a blast every time I used it. I even got into a bit of a 1v1 tag battle with a fellow Tropy one game. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. the limit was brought back and implemented into this event. It was raised to 6 per day rather than 5, and the main attraction was moved to the first reward of the pass. As I'm not privy to any internal data, I'm not sure whether the daily limit is a deal breaker for Toys for Bob when it comes to player retention, but if we are forced to deal with some form of daily limit, the way they've implemented it here, it's the best they can do. Maybe if they increase the limit throughout the event? It's just unfortunate that to get everything on the event pass, you essentially need to play Rumble every day, when some people would rather pull an all-nighter and collect everything within several hours. Then we come to the patch on August 15th. Scorers now gain more charge for their powers through breaking crates, to allow them to use their powers slightly easier, while blockers and boosters have their charge decreased to even them out with the scorers. Bank Barrage and Plasma Turret had their relic cost reduced to hopefully increase their use. Wumper Bat had its Wumper payload increased, buff to Torna's damage output, and nerf to Tropy's health. 2 days later on August 17th, Zap Trap 2 begins. No different than Zap Trap 1, other than a couple new cosmetics. Toys for Bob announces new modes like this may be designated to a rotating game mode selection called TFB Labs. On August 24th, our second character of the season releases. Engine. Though a booster through and through, his damage output can make him a tough opponent to take down if he's in the right hands. His low health accounts for this by essentially making him a glass cannon. You can dish it out, but you can't take very much in return. He has his own built-in jump crates that damages enemies, with the ability to spawn a boombox that causes knockback. His jetpack not only raises him up, but also gives him some much needed horizontal speed, which players will need to get used to all the time to make up for his sluggish ground speed. Overall, Engine is an absolute weapon, and feels very much like if Catbat and Cortex mashed up a bit, while not quite reaching the heights of either of them personally. I can definitely say that I love playing as Engine. His event worked essentially the same as Sticky TNT, with his event collectible being the biggest and most visible so far, which was definitely appreciated. And that brings us to now. Season 1 has ended and Season 2 has started, introducing a new party mode, a 4-player cooperative mode of minigames. I won't go into detail with any of that stuff until my next video when we recap Season 2, but I feel like I have to mention that Tropy has been nerfed again. Her time tethers now cancel her melee combo, meaning you can't spam the combo and time tethers without severely underpowering your combo. Tropy was definitely a force to fear when the game dropped, but after several nerfs to her health, damage output, and now moveset, Tropy is beginning to feel incredibly frail. Hopefully data will reflect this and we'll see some changes in future patches. Time will only tell. Overall, Season 1 was pretty good. Toys for Bob was very active when it came to listening to the community, and even though they haven't perfected the game, the steps they have taken does have me believing the game is in good hands. At the time of recording, we don't have a detailed calendar of Season 2, but even after a day of playing some of the new minigames, I'm intrigued and excited to keep playing. Now I feel like I have to rate some stuff, since I did a bit of that in the last video. Let's do my personal picks for worst to best legendary skins from Season 1's Battle Pass. Number 10. Fouled Out Dingodile. I think this was one of the skins from the beta, but the hockey mask setup just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't help that the other Dingo skin on this pass is infinitely better. Number 9. Inventor Coco. I gotta be honest, I don't even really hate this one, but being one of the skins that almost everyone got first gave it this basic stench that I couldn't get over. It's honestly such an unfair critique, but I can't help it. Number 8. Clown Cortex. A very basic face paint job that does nothing but make Cortex look goofy. Plus, his other skin on the pass is just miles better. Number 7. Empirical Formula Brio. A classic royal garb looks nice on Brio, but it has me thinking it's kind of unfortunate that his brute form doesn't get any sort of customization options. Number 6. Time Jester Tropy. If being at the start of the pass damages your rep, then being at the very end of the pass and not being amazing does the same. This skin is definitely cool, with my favourite part being the wind-up mechanism on the back, implying she's a Jester wind-up toy. But being at level 100 to unlock this, it's just not as good as it should be. Number 5. Too Cool Torna. Just a really cool EDM looking jumpsuit, plus glasses combo. Solid pick. Number 4. Mummy Crash. My favourite skin from the beta, the glowing eyes and wrapped up garb makes Crash look kinda creepy, but cool. Number 3. Cybernetic Cortex. This skin is awesome, but I had to put it up this high simply for the visible brain suspended in the otherwise hollow Cortex head. Kinda expected bigger for a doctor of his caliber. Number 2. Peer Pressure Dingodile. This is probably a lot of people's favourite skin from the past, and I can't blame you. The wide eyes along with the rippled purple skin, Dingo's spin attack even changes to the same bright purple when you attack. Number 1. Scar Catbat. I'm a sucker for suave looking outfits on my characters. If in the future they add a Crash wearing a tuxedo, I will main that skin on him for the rest of time. After maxing out Coco and obtaining the platinum for the game, switching to Catbat had me appreciating their playstyle even more than I originally did. Not enough to switch them with Coco as my new favourite, but just vindicated I had them so high to begin with. And there you have it, an in-depth recap on all the goings-on of Crash Team Rumble Season 1. I can't wait to get my hands on the new character Ripto this season, especially since I felt he was snubbed from appearing in Crash Team Nitro Fueled years ago, and I hope I'll be singing more praises for the game when my next video comes out shortly after the end of Season 2. Subscribe so you don't miss that video or any of my others. If you had any interesting observations about the game in its current state, feel free to start a conversation down below, and I'll see you all next time.